Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and I think for the first time ever we're going to talk about a Grand Prix after we've already talked about the Grand Prix. But of course something happened that has made it interesting. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have both been disqualified because they failed. It was either ride heights or it's to do with the plank. I think it was plank wear, which is a funny sentence. But it's hugely costly for both drivers. Both get their results chucked out. Hamilton, of course, finished second. But imagine how hilarious it would have been if he won. His first win in nearly 2 years, and he got disqualified. Charles Leclerc didn't have a great race in the end anyway. He dropped quite far back, but still a bit of a kick in the teeth for him. The beneficiaries, Lando Norris finished second, and Carlos Sainz finished third. Also, Logan Sargent gets his first Formula 1 point because he finished 12th in the race. 2 disqualifications in front of him means he finished 10th. So the American scores his first points in America. Really happy for him. I think he really deserves it. But it's interesting because by the sounds of it, neither team are going to appeal or anything. They've both accepted fault, which is good. It means it's kind of just done and over. We don't have to worry about it again after this. But they say it's because of the sprint format. They only had an hour to set up the car. That means any mistakes they made wouldn't be caught in the second practice session or the third practice session. So they have to go ahead with what they've done in the first hour. Part of thermic conditions, they can't touch it. Now, Ferrari said that it was due to the bumpiness of the track, but also something to do with the wind causing more drag or something. And so the car hit the ground more, wore away the plank, failed for height check. And whilst I sympathise with both teams, because it's kind of not fair, they only had an hour, and it's to do with the sprint format, which I've already said I'm not a fan of. They are the only 2 cars that had this issue, including their teammates who did not get disqualified. Now, I think George Russell was too far down the grid to get checked. I think they only checked the top 6 cars. I don't think they checked all of them. I might be wrong about that. But from what I read, I think only the top 6 cars were checked and Hamilton and Leclerc failed. But that still leaves all the other cars up there who didn't fail, like Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz Jr. They all passed just fine, which means they got it right. Sergio Perez as well. And so this huge mistake from the teams will cost the drivers quite harshly. Leclerc is not having a great year anyway, and he's quite far behind the main drivers in the championship, but he's quite far behind Carlos Sainz now as well. And Lewis Hamilton was chasing Sergio Perez in second. This gives Perez a bit of a buffer. I think he's about 40 points ahead of Hamilton. So really, if Sergio Perez can get a couple of podium finishes in the last 2 races, which is not out of the realms of possibility, and we do have Mexico next, so his home crowd might cheer him on, give him a bit of energy and get him up to the top step. But for Hamilton, I think if it's unlikely he's going to win a race, and I think the Mercedes is showing a bit of promise, he might. Then if he's not, he still can score about 60-70 points in the last 4 races if it goes his way. So Perez needs to do about score at least like 30 or 40. So he doesn't, as long as Perez doesn't crash out of 4 races in a row, he should be alright in second, which would be a great result for Red Bull, their first ever 1-2 in the championship, and a big boost for them going into next year as well. And I think Lewis, this is the first time he hasn't scored points 2 races in a row since 2010, which was the only other time in his career that he'd done that, which I think was the Italian and Singapore Grand Prix of 2010 with the McLaren. So, I mean, if you actually look through Lewis Hamilton's career, Mercedes have had bulletproof reliability, and so he has very few did not finishes. I don't know how many times he's been disqualified. This might be the first. It doesn't actually happen that often in Formula 1. You see it more often in other formats. So it's quite a rarity in Formula 1. I remember Sauber's getting disqualified after getting a points finish because their rear wings were too big. Or something like that. I can't remember. But I think this is quite embarrassing for Mercedes and Ferrari. And Obviously, we've got more sprint race weekends coming up, so it'll be interesting to see if teams play it cautiously, if that has an effect on anything. It does, I think, give a little bit of interest to the rest of the season. Ferrari also closed up to Mercedes in the Constructors, although not by too much, because I think George Russell got moved up to 5th. So there's only the difference between 3rd and 5th. And Mercedes might have scored enough points in the sprint race to offset that. I'm not actually 100% sure on that. And it's still pretty close between those two teams. McLaren are probably too far away. I think they're 100 points behind Mercedes, so it's highly unlikely McLaren, unless McLaren have a great last 4 races of the year and Mercedes have a terrible last 4 races of the year. I think McLaren are safe in 4th, and I think Mercedes versus Ferrari 2nd and 3rd. That's the real fight going into the end of the year, with Hamilton versus Perez for 2nd. I think Sainz can catch Hamilton and he might catch Alonso, but I think there's quite big gaps between them. It'll be interesting to see. I think Sainz is driving really well, so it might be worth keeping an eye on him for 2nd, possibly most likely 3rd or 4th. And it'll be interesting to see if Ferrari can catch Mercedes. Mercedes' race pace looks better than Ferrari's, but not by much, and so if something goes Ferrari's way, they could still finish 2nd. So anyway, they were just my brief thoughts on this incident. Massive shout out to Logan Sargent. I'm so happy he at least scored a point this year, because it's been a tough year for him. And we have Mexico in just a few days' time. Well, 6 days' time. And I am covering... the next video will be my weekend roundup. I'm still watching Motorsport at the moment. I've still got a few things to watch before I do that video. So hopefully we'll be out tomorrow, but possibly Wednesday, because there's actually quite a lot. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and have a good one.